I pulled into my driveway just after sunset, bone-tired from the flight back from Vancouver. 2 weeks. 2 painfully long weeks away from home. My mother's stroke had hit us out of nowhere, and I'd spent every hour by her hospital bed, praying, hoping, bargaining with God in ways I hadn't done since I was a boy. But she was stable now, and all I wanted, all I needed, was to get home to Margaret. My wife had early onset Alzheimer's, and being away from her this long felt like I'd left half my soul behind. But Jennifer, our daughter, had promised she'd stay with her. She told me not to worry, that she'd take care of everything until I returned. And I believed her. Of course I did. She's my daughter. I stepped out of the car and looked at the house. Something felt off. It was dark, completely dark. At 8 p.m., Margaret never left the lights off. Darkness made her anxious, even before the Alzheimer's. She always kept the living room lamp glowing like a little lighthouse waiting for me to come home. A small weight settled in my stomach. I walked up to the front door, suitcase rolling behind me, and slid the key in. That's when I heard it. A sound. A faint, desperate thumping, coming from inside the house. I froze. Then came a voice, weak, hoarse, muffled, like someone crying through a wall. My heart slammed against my ribs. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The house was cold, silent, wrong. Then the sound came again, louder this time. Thump, 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 followed by a broken whisper. Help, please. The voice was coming from the basement. I dropped the suitcase. Margaret? My voice cracked as I ran toward the basement door. But the door, God, the door had a heavy padlock on it, a thick, metal, unfamiliar lock on the outside. I stared at it, stunned. Why would there be a lock here? Who put this on my basement? Thomas. The voice floated through the wood, weak and trembling. Thomas, please, I'm down here. My chest tightened until it hurt. I sprinted to the garage, grabbed the crowbar, and returned so fast I nearly slipped. My hands were shaking. My entire body was shaking. I jammed the crowbar under the lock and pulled with everything I had. Metal screeched. Wood splintered. The lock snapped loose. I threw the door open. The smell hit me first. A sour, suffocating mix of urine, sweat, fear. A smell no human being should ever be surrounded by. I turned on the basement light, and my world collapsed. Margaret was lying at the bottom of the stairs, barefoot, filthy, her nightgown ripped, her hair tangled, her face sunken and gray like she had been carved out of suffering. She looked up at me, her eyes cloudy and confused. For a moment, she didn't recognize me, and when she finally did, her lips trembled. Thomas, is that really you? I ran down the stairs and dropped to my knees beside her. She felt weightless when I lifted her, too light, too cold. She clung to me like a scared child who had been waiting in the dark for someone who might never come. I'm here, sweetheart. I'm here. My voice broke. I've got you. You're safe now. I carried her upstairs, every step feeling like I was walking through a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Her hands were shaking in mine. Her breathing was shallow. Her lips were cracked from dehydration. I laid her gently on the couch and grabbed my phone. 911, please, I need an ambulance. My wife. She's been locked in the basement. She's hurt. Please hurry. The dispatcher asked questions, but they sounded far away. My thoughts were spinning. Where was Jennifer? Why weren't the lights on? Why were there boxes stacked in corners? Why was the house rearranged? Nothing made sense. Nothing except the truth forming in my gut. Something terrible had happened here. When the paramedics arrived, they checked her vitals. Severely dehydrated, malnourished. She's hypothermic. One of them turned to me. Sir, when did you last see your wife? I swallowed hard. 2 weeks ago. I left her with my daughter. Jennifer was taking care of her while I was away. The paramedics exchanged a look, a silent, heavy look, the kind that says, "This wasn't an accident." I rode in the ambulance holding Margaret's hand, whispering to her, "I'm here now. I'm here. I won't leave you again, I swear." But deep in my chest, something cold was spreading. Something told me this was only the beginning. The ambulance sliced through the quiet Toronto streets, sirens low but urgent. Margaret lay beside me on the stretcher. Wrapped in blankets, the paramedics kept tucking around her like they were trying to warm a memory back to life. Her hand felt cold in mine, too cold, and every few seconds her fingers twitched, searching, gripping, losing strength again. I leaned close to her. "I'm right here, sweetheart. I'm not leaving you." She tried to speak. Her lips parted, but only a faint breath came out. It shattered me. The paramedic across from me glanced at the monitors. "Her vitals are low but stable. She's dehydrated and malnourished. We'll take care of her." I nodded, but my mind was spinning, unraveling threads I didn't want to see the ends of. 2 weeks. 2 whole weeks. Jennifer had been here. She had been responsible. She had answered my calls in week 1, then texted in week 2, then nothing. Where was she now? Why wasn't she here? Why wasn't she calling? The questions were a rising tide I couldn't hold back. We reached St. Michael's Hospital. They rushed Margaret inside, sliding her into a trauma room under bright white lights that made her look even smaller than she already was. A nurse gently guided me out into the hallway. "Mr. Holloway, we need to stabilize her. Please wait out here." I stood there, my hand still trembling, staring through the glass at the woman I'd been married to for 40 years. The woman who used to beat me at Scrabble and dance barefoot in the kitchen while pancakes burned. And now she was fighting for her life because someone had locked her in a basement like she wasn't a human being. I pressed my palms to my face and tried to breathe, but each breath felt sharp. After what felt like an hour, maybe more, a nurse walked up to me. "Mr. Holloway, your wife is stable for now." I exhaled, shaking. But she hesitated. "We need to ask, has she been confined like that for the entire 2 weeks you were away?" The words punched the air out of my lungs. 2 weeks, 14 days, in the dark, without food, without water. "I don't know," I whispered. "I just found her like that." The nurse placed a gentle hand on my arm. "We're contacting authorities. This is very serious." She walked away, and I felt something cold and hollow spreading inside me. A few minutes later, a man approached, tall, mid-50s, wearing a gray suit and a badge clipped to his belt. "Mr. Holloway, I'm Detective Morrison, Elder Abuse Unit." Elder Abuse Unit. I never even knew such a unit existed. He motioned toward a quieter corner of the waiting room. "Let's sit." I sank into the chair like my bones had turned to sand. "Tell me everything," he said. So I did. From the moment my sister called about my mother's stroke, to Jennifer volunteering to take care of Margaret, to the daily check-ins during the first week, to the unanswered calls during the second, to walking into a dark house and hearing my wife begging behind a locked basement door. Detective Morrison's pen moved steadily across his notebook. When I finished, he looked up, his expression steady but sharpened. "Mr. Holloway, did you give your daughter power of attorney over your wife's care or finances while you were gone?" "No, never." "Did your wife sign anything? Any legal documents, forms?" "No. Margaret struggles with paperwork. I handle everything." Morrison closed his notebook. "All right. We'll investigate further. This isn't just neglect. This looks deliberate." The room tilted slightly under my feet. Deliberate? My own daughter? My Jennifer? I shook my head. No, she wouldn't. She couldn't do this." Morrison didn't argue. He didn't need to. The basement, the padlock, Margaret's condition, it all spoke for itself. He simply said, "I'll be in touch, Mr. Holloway. We're going to get to the bottom of this." He walked away to speak with the medical team, and I sat there alone, staring at my hands still trembling. Because deep down, in a place I didn't want to look, a terrifying thought had begun to form. What if Jennifer hadn't failed to take care of her mother? What if she had intended not to? The next morning, after hours of watching monitors, whispering to Margaret and trying to make sense of the impossible, a nurse convinced me to go home. "Get some rest," she said softly. "You can't help her if you collapse." She was right, but rest was the last thing my mind was capable of. I drove back home in a fog, headlights slicing through the early morning mist, until my house came into view again. Still dark, still wrong. I stepped inside and paused. The air felt violated, as if someone had lived here with intentions that didn't belong in a family home. I walked slowly through the living room, noticing everything that felt out of place. The couch was slightly angled wrong. The throw blanket folded differently. A coffee mug left on a table where Margaret never left dishes. Then I stepped into the kitchen. That's when my stomach dropped. Margaret's pill organizer, the one I filled every Sunday with her medications, was gone, vanished, removed intentionally. Not forgotten, removed. Her water bottles, usually kept in a neat row for the week, gone. The fruit bowl emptied, the counters rearranged, and then something else. Something that tightened cold fingers around my spine. Jennifer's laptop, sitting right on the table, open, still logged in. I wasn't proud of what I did next, but I had to know. I had to understand. I sat down slowly, my hands trembling as I touched the trackpad. The screen lit up instantly. Emails, documents, PDFs, scanned forms. I clicked the first one. Power of attorney. Signed by Margaret Holloway. Witnessed by Notary Office of Scarborough. My breath froze. Margaret's signature was shaky, slanted, confused. A signature of someone who didn't understand what she was signing. No, 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 voice trembling. I opened another file. Bank statements, large withdrawals, $15,000, $30,000, $20,000, all within the first week I was gone. Then, a HELOC application, a home equity line of credit, approved, $100,000, against our home, the home we'd owned free and clear for 2 decades. My throat tightened so hard it hurt. I kept scrolling. Another file. Investment opportunity, Thornhill Capital Management. I clicked it. A business logo, a company mission, a portfolio. But something felt cheap, fake, artificial, like it had been pieced together from Canva templates and downloaded icons. Then the founder's name at the bottom, Kyle Morrison, my son-in-law. My pulse surged. I wasn't breathing. I wasn't blinking. I wasn't even thinking clearly anymore. I clicked open the text messages next, between Jennifer and Kyle. My eyes stung as I read, "Kyle, she keeps crying for your dad. This isn't going to work. Jennifer, she'll forget. Just give it another day. The confusion helps. The confusion helps." My hand slapped over my mouth. A noise escaped me, half sob, half disbelief, like my brain couldn't decide which emotion came first. Kyle, what if someone checks on her? Jennifer, who? Dad's in Vancouver. No one else comes here. We're fine. A chill crawled through me. My daughter, my only child. She didn't just neglect her mother. She planned this. She calculated it. She controlled it. I kept scrolling, my eyes catching each message like a cut. Kyle, we need her signature for the bank. Make sure she's calm, Jennifer. She's confused but cooperative. She thinks the paperwork is for Dad. Kyle, perfect. Once we move the money, we lock things down. Lock things down. My jaw clenched so tight it hurt. Margaret, locked down. In the basement. Because she might talk. Because she might recognize something was wrong. Because she might call for me. And they couldn't risk it. I kept scrolling, even though every part of me wanted to throw the laptop across the room and scream. Then I reached the final messages from 2 days ago. Kyle, everything's ready. Portugal confirmed. Tickets bought. Jennifer, good. Once Mom's gone, we can leave without loose ends. My vision blurred. I blinked, trying to make sure I wasn't reading it wrong. Once Mom's gone. Gone. They were waiting. Waiting for Margaret to die in that cold, dark basement, so they could disappear to another country with $175,000 of stolen money. I staggered back from the table, breath shaking uncontrollably. I felt something break inside me, something that could never be put back the same way. My daughter, the girl I raised, the girl I carried on my shoulders, the girl whose scraped knees I kissed, had locked her mother in a basement and waited for her to die so she could steal from us. I grabbed my phone with numb fingers. Detective Morrison, you need to come to my house, now. His response was immediate. On my way. I hung up, stood there in the middle of my kitchen, hands shaking, heart pounding, mind screaming, and for the first time since Margaret whispered my name through that door, I felt something I didn't expect. Not sadness, not fear, not confusion. Rage. Deep, burning, relentless rage. Detective Morrison arrived within 20 minutes, 2 officers stepping in behind him. Their faces were serious, controlled, the kind of expression people wear when they already expect the worst. Mr. Holloway, Morrison said, show me what you found. I led them to the kitchen table, my hands still shaking as I pushed the laptop toward him. He slipped on a pair of gloves, the snap of the latex echoing in the quiet room, and began scrolling through the documents I had opened. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His eyes told me everything. Power of attorney forged, bank withdrawals, HELOC approval, transfers to Thornhill Capital, texts between Jennifer and Kyle discussing locking Margaret away, Portugal rentals, plane tickets. Finally, he exhaled slowly. This is extensive. Call it what it is, I whispered. It's evil. He looked at me with a calm, steady seriousness. Mr. Holloway, what your daughter and son-in-law did isn't just morally wrong, it's criminal. Elder abuse, fraud, financial exploitation, unlawful confinement, attempted flight. One of the officers spoke up. This is a full-scale exploitation case. A full-scale exploitation case. My daughter. The words made my knees feel weak. Morrison stood. Show me the basement. I swallowed hard and led them to the door. The same door with the broken lock and splintered frame. The smell still lingered. The darkness at the bottom felt heavier now that I knew the truth behind it. The detective stepped down slowly, scanning every inch. The bucket in the corner, the thin blanket, the cold concrete floor, the missing light bulb, the scratch marks on the door where Margaret had tried to claw her way out. His jaw tightened. This wasn't just evidence. This was cruelty. 14 days, he murmured. I nodded weakly. He looked up at me. Your early return likely saved her life. Those words hit me harder than the truth I had already discovered. If I had stayed in Vancouver for the full 2 weeks, if I had listened to Jennifer's texts, if I hadn't gotten on the red-eye flight earlier, Margaret might not be alive. Morrison climbed the stairs. Forensics will need to photograph this. We'll get a search warrant for the rest of the house. I took a breath, trying to calm the fury building inside me. What now? Now, he said firmly, we find your daughter. Jennifer and Kyle lived in a condo in Liberty Village, about a 20-minute drive. When officers arrived, the door was locked, blinds drawn, no sign of movement. But when building management let them inside, the place was nearly empty. The furniture was gone. Closets stripped, drawers pulled out, clothes missing, electronics missing. But in the trash bin, the one thing criminals always forget, officers found what they needed: printed bank statements, a rental agreement from Lisbon, 2 one-way tickets to Portugal, a packing list written in Jennifer's handwriting, and a shredded envelope from a crypto exchange. We were planning to leave that night, disappear, start a new life funded by money stolen from a woman who couldn't even remember what year it was. An officer texted Morrison immediately. They fled the condo. Looks like they're preparing to leave the country. Morrison turned to me. If they bought international tickets, they'll go through Pearson. We're alerting border services now. While he made calls, I stood there feeling a mixture of grief, rage, and disbelief twisting inside me. She was my little girl, I whispered. Why would she do this? Morrison paused, then answered with quiet honesty. People will do terrible things for money, and they will justify them in even more terrible ways. It didn't take long. 2 days later, just after sunrise, I woke to my phone ringing. Unknown number. I answered anyway. Mr. Holloway, this is Detective Morrison. We have them. I sat up in bed, heart hammering. Where? At Pearson Airport. They were attempting to board a flight to London. Border officers flagged them. They're in custody now. For a moment, I didn't know how to breathe. Jennifer, my daughter, in handcuffs. Kyle, too. I should have felt relief. I should have felt victory. But all I felt was emptiness, a hollow ache right behind my ribs. My daughter hadn't just broken the law. She had broken something inside me, something I wasn't sure could ever be repaired. Later that afternoon, Morrison met me at the hospital to update me. Mr. Holloway, he said, the Crown is pursuing full charges. He handed me a printed sheet. I stared at it as the words blurred together. Elder abuse, unlawful confinement, financial exploitation, fraud over $5,000, forgery, theft over $5,000. And Kyle? I asked, though I already knew. Kyle will face additional charges for operating a Ponzi scheme using the stolen funds. A Ponzi scheme, of course. Thornhill Capital wasn't an investment firm. It was a scam built on lies and empty promises. They had dragged Margaret into that darkness for a scheme that wasn't even real. Detective Morrison rested a hand on my shoulder. I know this is hard, but you did the right thing hard. The word felt too small. There are no words for discovering your only child locked your wife in a basement to let her die so she could steal your life savings to fund a fake investment scheme and flee the country. There are no words, only consequences. Margaret spent the next 3 days at St. Michael's Hospital, hooked up to IV drips that slowly brought hydration and color back into her body. But her eyes looked different, like something inside them had dimmed. She would wake up confused, whispering my name or asking where she was. Sometimes she cried without understanding why. Sometimes she flinched when someone opened a door too loudly. Sometimes she stared at the ceiling as if listening for footsteps coming down basement stairs. Every time she did, it broke another piece of me. On the second day, Detective Morrison visited again. He pulled me aside into a quiet hallway where sunlight filtered through tall windows. Mr. Holloway, he said softly, we need to confirm something. Has your wife ever been locked in the basement before, even accidentally? No, I whispered. Never. She doesn't even go down there. He nodded. It matched their theory. This wasn't neglect. This wasn't confusion. This was a deliberate act. His tone lowered. And based on the evidence, we believe she was down there for the full 14 days. My chest tightened so suddenly I had to lean against the wall to steady myself. 14 days! My voice cracked as the number echoed in my head. 14 days without food, 14 days without water, 14 days in darkness, 14 days of fear she didn't understand. Margaret's Alzheimer's meant she didn't know where she was, didn't know why she was alone, didn't know why no one came. She must have spent those days confused, terrified, calling for me, and wondering why I didn't answer. That thought alone could have killed me. On the third day, Margaret was awake enough that a doctor allowed a brief police interview. She sat, propped up on pillows, wrapped in blankets, her voice faint and fragile. Detective Morrison kept his questions simple, patient. "Margaret, do you remember being downstairs?" She nodded slowly. "Was it dark?" "Yes," a tremor in her voice. "So dark." "Do you remember who put you there?" Her brow furrowed. She blinked a few times, struggling to gather memories through the fog of dementia and trauma. Then she whispered, "Jenny. Jenny said she would be right back." Jenny, our daughter's childhood nickname. I closed my eyes, trying to hold myself together, trying not to break down in front of Margaret. The officer nodded gently and didn't push her further. He had enough. When the hospital finally discharged her, I brought her home. But the moment she stepped inside, she recoiled. Her eyes darted around the house like she remembered pieces of what happened. She walked toward the basement door slowly, cautiously, like her feet were moving without her permission. "Sweetheart," I whispered, placing my hand on her back. "You don't have to go there. You're safe." She looked up at me, her eyes watery. Don't leave me alone, Thomas." "I won't," I promised, voice trembling. "Not for a second." I hired a full-time caregiver the next morning, a woman named Elena, kind eyes, gentle voice, someone who knew how to work with Alzheimer's patients. I also changed every lock in the house, installed cameras, replaced the basement door entirely. Even though Jennifer and Kyle were behind bars, the fear lingered in the walls. 2 weeks after the arrest, I met with the Crown Attorney, Patricia Chen. Sharp, professional, fierce. She laid out the case in detail, spread across a conference table like a battlefield map. "Mr. Holloway," she said, "we are dealing with one of the most extreme cases of elder abuse I've seen in my career." She pointed to the evidence folders. First, the confinement. Second, the financial exploitation. Third, the premeditation. She tapped the file containing Jennifer and Kyle's text messages. These messages show intent, planning, coordination. I watched as she read aloud from one of the texts. "She'll forget. Just give it another day." Patricia shook her head. "That is cold, calculated. Prosecutors dream of evidence like this, but in real life, it's horrifying." I swallowed, my throat burning. "What's going to happen to them?" She leaned forward. "For Jennifer, we're pursuing maximum sentencing, 12 years. For Kyle, with the fraud charges added, 10 to 15. "And the money?" I asked, though I already feared the answer. Her expression softened. "I'll be honest, most of it is gone." Gone. Just like that. Decades of savings. Everything we'd put aside for Margaret's care. Gone in 2 weeks. I felt hollow. Patricia placed a hand over mine, not as an attorney, but as a person. "We'll pursue restitution, but realistically, you may never see a cent." I wasn't willing to stop at criminal charges. I hired a lawyer, Christopher Walsh, an expert in elder law. He sat across from me, flipping through documents with a clinical precision. "Thomas," he said, "you have grounds to sue for everything. Not just the stolen money. Emotional distress, damages, long-term impact." "How much can I sue for?" He didn't hesitate. $375,000, minimum. And after the judgment, we can place liens on future assets, their wages, property, inheritance, anything they ever gain. It felt strange, suing my own daughter. But the moment I pictured Margaret lying in that cold, dark basement, I knew this wasn't about vengeance. It was survival. For her. For me. For what was left of our life. Jennifer's CPA license was suspended. Her company placed her on immediate leave. Her name was being whispered in newsrooms and law offices across Toronto. Kyle's Ponzi scheme was exposed. Dozens of elderly victims came forward. Investors demanded answers. The police froze whatever little money remained in his accounts. Everywhere I turned, there was a new layer of betrayal unraveling. These weren't mistakes. These weren't impulsive decisions. They were plans, detailed, prepared, executed with chilling patience. The courthouse felt cold that morning, not because of the weather, but because of the weight of what was about to happen. I sat on a wooden bench outside courtroom 4B, hands clasped, heart pounding slow and heavy like a warning drum. Elena stayed home with Margaret. She was too fragile, too easily triggered, to sit through anything like this. I kept staring at the courtroom doors, knowing the people who destroyed our lives were standing just behind them. Jennifer, my daughter, and Kyle, her husband, the man whose voice never once sounded sincere when he said, "I'll take care of your daughter, sir." Detective Morrison approached and sat beside me. "Nervous?" he asked gently. "More than nervous," I whispered. "I don't even know what I'm supposed to feel." "That's normal," he said. "Cases like this, the emotional cost is heavier than the legal one." He was right. This wasn't just a case. This was a family collapsing under the weight of its own betrayal. The court doors opened and a guard escorted Kyle inside first. He looked smaller than usual, hair unkempt, jumpsuit too big, wrists cuffed. Yet he still had that familiar smirk, the one he used whenever he thought he was smarter than everyone around him. Then Jennifer entered, and for a moment, I forgot how to breathe. She shuffled forward in handcuffs, wearing the same orange jumpsuit, her hair tied back, her face pale and swollen from crying. When she saw me sitting there, she stopped, completely stopped. Her eyes widened, her lips parted. She looked like a child walking into a nightmare she created herself. "Dad, Dad, please." I turned my face away. I couldn't look at her, not after what she'd done, not after the basement, not after the text messages, not after she'd waited for Margaret to die. Inside the courtroom, the judge entered with the quiet authority of someone who had seen humanity's darkest corners more times than she wished. The attorneys took their places. The Crown Attorney, Patricia Chen, stood tall, a force of precision and controlled fire. Jennifer's defense lawyer looked nervous, overwhelmed, scrambling through notes. Kyle's lawyer sat stiff, already aware he had a losing battle. Patricia stood and began. "Your Honor, the Crown intends to demonstrate premeditation, exploitation, confinement, and significant financial fraud committed by the accused, Miss Jennifer Holloway and Mr. Kyle Morrison." Her voice didn't shake. Mine would have. She laid out everything like a puzzle coming together piece by piece. The forged documents, the missing medications, the bank withdrawals, the HELOC, the transfers to Thornhill Capital, the basement conditions, the text messages, the Portugal plane tickets. Each point landed like a hammer. Jennifer quietly sobbed into her hands. Kyle stared at the floor like he wished the tile would swallow him. Patricia ended with a final blow. These actions were not accidents. They were deliberate decisions carried out over days, with the intent to financially exploit and potentially cause the death of a vulnerable elderly woman. "The evidence is overwhelming." Her defense attorney made a desperate attempt. "Your Honor, Miss Holloway would like to make a statement." Jennifer stood slowly, hands trembling. She looked at the judge, then at me, then back down at her shackled wrists. Her voice was barely more than a whisper. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I never meant. I didn't know it would get that bad. Mom was confused. I just wanted time to think. Kyle was pressuring me. I didn't. Patricia cut her off. Miss Holloway, her voice sliced the air like ice. You locked your mother in a basement. You removed her light bulb. You left her without food or water for 14 days. You used her Alzheimer's confusion to obtain her signature, and you purchased international tickets to flee the country. Jennifer sobbed harder, shaking uncontrollably. I didn't mean for her to suffer. I thought she would sleep. I didn't think. You didn't think, Patricia snapped. You planned this for weeks. Silence fell, raw, heavy, final. After hours of arguments, evidence review, and Jennifer's breakdown, the judge delivered her decision. It is the opinion of this court that sufficient evidence exists to move this case to trial. Miss Holloway, Mr. Morrison, you will remain in custody. Bail is denied. Jennifer gasped like she'd been punched. Kyle didn't react. He already knew this was coming. As guards moved toward them, Jennifer looked at me one last time. Dad, please say something. Please don't hate me. Her voice shattered as she spoke. I stood. My knees were shaking. My throat was tight. My chest felt like it was being crushed. I looked at her. Really looked at her. The woman who used to bring me handmade Father's Day cards in kindergarten. The teenager who cried when she didn't get into her first choice college. The young woman I walked down the aisle. And the monster who locked her mother in a basement to die. Soft, devastating pause. I don't hate you, I said quietly. For a moment, relief flickered across her face. Then I added, but I don't know who you are anymore. Her expression shattered. The guards led her away as she sobbed uncontrollably. Outside, I leaned against the wall and felt the weight of everything crash down on me. Detective Morrison stepped beside me. You did the right thing, he said softly. I nodded, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like mourning. Not mourning for Jennifer, but for the daughter I had lost long before I realized she was gone. The weeks that followed the preliminary hearing felt strange, like time was moving and I wasn't moving with it. Days passed in a blur of hospital visits, legal calls, and moments of silence so heavy they felt like they were crushing my ribs. Margaret had stabilized physically, but mentally, she drifted in and out like a radio signal fading through static. Sometimes she remembered me, sometimes she didn't. Sometimes she asked for Jennifer, using her nickname, Jenny, and sometimes she stared at me like I was a visitor she didn't fully trust yet. Every time she asked about our daughter, a blade twisted inside me. How do you tell a woman with Alzheimer's that her daughter tried to kill her? You don't. You simply don't. I would just say, she's away for a while, sweetheart. But I'm right here. And Margaret would nod, sometimes believing it, sometimes forgetting the question altogether. 3 weeks after the hearing, I received a call from the Crown Attorney, Patricia Chen. Mr. Holloway, can you come in today? Something significant has developed. Of course, I said, heart already thudding. When I arrived, Patricia motioned me into a conference room. Detective Morrison was there too. Both looked tense, but in a focused, purposeful way. Patricia folded her hands. Mr. Holloway, Kyle Morrison has approached us through his attorney. A cold chill ran down my spine. What does he want? She took a breath. A plea deal. I sat up. For what reason? Patricia slid a folder toward me. He's willing to plead guilty to all charges and testify against Jennifer. Pause. I blinked, trying to process, trying to make sense of it. He wants to testify against his own wife. He does, Patricia confirmed, in exchange for a reduced sentence. I leaned back, stunned. Kyle, the crypto scammer, the manipulator, the man who had helped lock Margaret away, was now willing to turn on Jennifer. Why now? I asked quietly. Patricia tapped the folder. Because the evidence against him is overwhelming, and because he knows Jennifer is the stronger target for us. She created the fake financial statements. She researched exploitation laws. She signed multiple documents. She planned the timeline. She initiated the basement confinement. We can prove she was the driving force. I closed my eyes. My daughter, the mastermind, the architect of her mother's suffering. What exactly is Kyle offering? I asked. He'll give us everything, Patricia said. Full testimony, dates, conversations, digital files, screenshots, names of other investors he scammed, details about how Jennifer convinced him to go along with the plan. Detective Morrison added, if he testifies, the case becomes airtight. Jennifer has no defense. I thought about Margaret in that basement, shivering, confused, crying for help that never came. I took a slow breath. Take the deal, I said. Patricia nodded. Kyle will receive 8 years in federal prison. He'll be eligible for parole only after serving at least 5. Good, I whispered. It didn't feel like relief. It felt like necessary justice. When Patricia began preparing me for trial, she revealed details I didn't know. Details Kyle had confessed during proffer sessions. Some of it, I wish I never heard. Kyle told prosecutors. Jennifer began researching power of attorney laws months before my mother's stroke. She looked up countries without extradition for fraud. She prepared the scheme long before the opportunity arrived. She pressured Kyle to set up Thornhill Capital as a fake investment firm. She told him Alzheimer's would make Margaret easy to manage. She orchestrated the bank withdrawals. She insisted on locking Margaret away to avoid risk. She purchased the plane tickets herself. She planned the timing around my trip, believing I'd stay longer due to the medical emergency. I felt sick. Jennifer, my daughter, the little girl I carried on my shoulders, the teenager who used to hug me from behind while I cooked breakfast, the young woman I walked down the aisle with tears in my eyes. She had been planning to betray us long before I ever left for Vancouver. And the worst part, the part that hollowed me out completely. Kyle said Jennifer told him, Mom won't last long anyway. Dad will move on. We need the money more than they do. I felt my stomach twist. My daughter had stopped seeing Margaret as a person. She saw her as an obstacle, a liability, an inconvenience. Trial preparation consumed my life for weeks. I met with Patricia again and again, reviewed documents, prepared testimony, revisited memories I wished I never had to relive. It felt like tearing open a wound every single day. Patricia explained, Kyle's testimony is powerful, but your testimony is the heart of this case. You found Margaret. You uncovered the documents. You provide the emotional truth that juries connect with. I nodded, even though each detail felt like a dagger. Detective Morrison reviewed the evidence. Photos of the basement, condition reports from the hospital, bank statements, the forged signature, the laptop files, text messages showing intent, video of Margaret's state when officers first arrived, statements from neighbors, digital forensics from the condo. Everything pointed in one direction. Jennifer wasn't pressured. She wasn't manipulated. She wasn't coerced. She orchestrated pretty much everything. I sat beside Margaret that night, in the dim glow of the bedroom lamp. She traced my hand with her fingers, slowly, absent-mindedly, the way she used to when we were young and she couldn't fall asleep. She whispered, Thomas, will Jenny visit? My throat tightened. I brushed her hair back gently. She's away right now, sweetheart. Oh, she nodded softly. She should come home. Her voice cracked a little. Tell her I miss her. I swallowed the ache in my chest. I will, I whispered, even though we both knew I couldn't. After she fell asleep, I sat there watching her breathe, thinking about how easily she could have died, how close she came to becoming a memory instead of a presence. And that night, for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something quiet, something final, a resolve. This wasn't about punishment anymore. This was about protecting Margaret and honoring what Jennifer tried to destroy. The courthouse was buzzing the morning Jennifer's trial began. Reporters outside, cameras flashing, people whispering phrases like elder abuse, financial exploitation, Toronto basement case. But inside the courtroom, there was only silence, a heavy, suffocating silence. I walked in slowly, feeling every step. Margaret couldn't be there. The doctors said it would traumatize her. So Elena stayed home with her, keeping her calm, keeping her safe. I took a seat in the front row, where Patricia said she wanted me. "Jurors look at you," she explained. "They feel the human cost." I didn't care about strategy. I just wanted the truth to be heard. Kyle came in first, escorted by 2 guards. He kept his eyes down, no smirk this time. His plea deal had already been accepted, but he still looked like a man whose life had collapsed beneath him. Then Jennifer entered. My breath caught in my throat. Even now, even after everything, seeing her in handcuffs hurt. Her hair was tied back tightly. She wore the same orange prison jumpsuit. Her eyes were swollen from crying, or from panic, hard to say. When she saw me, she froze mid-step. Her lips parted, a silent plea, a desperate hope, a flicker of the daughter I once knew. I looked away, not out of cruelty, but because I didn't know how to look at her without breaking. When the jurors entered, Patricia rose with a calm, confident authority. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," her voice was steady but carried a weight that filled the room. "This case is about betrayal, about the calculated exploitation of a vulnerable woman by someone she trusted more than anyone." Her daughter, Jennifer, lowered her head as Patricia continued. "You will see evidence that shows deliberate deceit, intentional isolation, and financial manipulation. Not spur-of-the-moment mistakes, but a coordinated plan." She paused. "And you will see how close Margaret Holloway came to losing her life." Those words hit me like a hammer. Patricia began with the documents. The forged power of attorney, bank withdrawals, HELOC forms, transfers to Kyle's fake company, email threads about Portugal housing, flight itineraries. Each item was displayed on a screen, each detail slicing deeper into the truth. The jurors watched. Some shook their heads. One older woman dabbed her eyes. Then Patricia presented the text messages. When the line appeared on the screen, "She'll forget. Just give it another day. The confusion helps." I heard someone in the jury whisper, "Oh my God." This was the moment Patricia warned me about. "Mr. Holloway, this part will be difficult." Difficult wasn't the word. When she played the police body cam footage, the footage taken the day they rescued Margaret, I felt my body go cold. The video showed a dark basement, a thin blanket on the concrete, a bucket in the corner, scratch marks on the inside of the door, a frail woman curled on the floor, shivering, confused, barely alive. Several jurors looked away. One covered her mouth. Jennifer stared at the table, tears dripping onto her hands. Kyle closed his eyes, like he hoped the darkness behind his eyelids would hide the reality. I couldn't look away, not because I wanted to see it, but because it was the truth. The truth Jennifer tried to bury, the truth she left to die. Patricia called me to the stand. I took a deep breath and stepped forward, my legs trembling slightly as I approached the witness chair. The bailiff asked me to swear the oath. "I do," I whispered. Patricia stood a few feet away, her expression gentle now, respectful, careful. "Mr. Holloway," she began softly, "tell the jury what you found when you returned home from Vancouver." I swallowed and began. The dark house, the thumping, Margaret's voice, the padlock, the crowbar, the smell, the sight of my wife, fragile, shaking, starved, at the bottom of the stairs. With every sentence I spoke, Jennifer shifted uneasily, her shoulders curling inward as if shrinking from my words. At one point, my voice cracked. I carried her upstairs, and I thought she was dying in my arms. A juror wiped away tears. Patricia nodded gently. "You're doing well," she said quietly. Then she continued, "Mr. Holloway, how did you discover your daughter's involvement?" I talked about the laptop, the forged signatures, the messages, the plane tickets, and then the hardest part. When Kyle told prosecutors Jennifer planned to wait until Margaret was gone, I realized I no longer recognized my daughter. My voice broke. I didn't try to hide it. The next day, Kyle testified. He walked to the stand, avoiding my gaze completely. His voice shook. "Jennifer planned most of it," he said. "She researched everything. She told me her mom wouldn't understand. She said her dad would move on. She said the money was theirs anyway." Jennifer buried her face in her hands. Kyle continued. "Locking Margaret in the basement was Jennifer's idea. She said her Alzheimer's would make her forget quicker if she was kept in the dark." Several jurors gasped. I felt something inside me collapse. Jennifer didn't look like she was crying anymore. She looked empty, drained, destroyed by the truth finally catching up. Her lawyer insisted she testify. A mistake, a desperate gamble. Jennifer stood slowly. Her voice trembled. "Dad, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." But Patricia cut her off politely. "This is for the jury, Miss Holloway." Jennifer cried, sobbed, tried to explain, tried to blame Kyle, tried to claim she panicked. But Patricia's questions were relentless. "You researched power of attorney months earlier. You transferred the money yourself? You bought the plane tickets? You locked your mother in a basement? You removed the light bulb? You blocked your father's calls?" Each question was a blow. Each answer chipped away at her defense. Finally, Patricia asked the last question. "Miss Holloway, did you at any point consider calling for help?" Jennifer broke completely. "No," she sobbed. "No, I didn't." Deliberations took 4 hours, 4 long, heavy hours. When the jurors returned, the courtroom fell silent. The foreperson stood. On the charge of elder abuse, we find the defendant guilty. I felt my breath catch. On the charge of unlawful confinement, guilty. Jennifer let out a broken cry. On the charge of fraud over $5,000, guilty. My chest ached. On all remaining counts, guilty. Jennifer collapsed into her chair, sobbing uncontrollably, and I just sat there, staring at the floor, feeling everything and nothing all at once. The sentencing hearing took place 2 months after the verdict. 2 long months filled with hospital visits, legal paperwork, and a strange, numb quiet that sat inside my chest like a stone I couldn't lift. The courtroom wasn't full this time. Just a few reporters, a few onlookers, and me. I sat in the same seat as before, hands folded tightly together, staring at the wooden table where Jennifer would take her place one last time. Patricia stepped forward first. "Your Honor," she said, her voice steady, "the Crown will present a victim impact statement from Mr. Thomas Holloway." My throat tightened. I stood slowly, walked to the podium, and unfolded the papers I had rewritten a dozen times. I didn't have to look at them. The words were burned into me. "Your Honor," I began, "my wife Margaret spent 14 days locked in a basement. 14 days of fear she couldn't understand. 14 days of suffering she didn't deserve." Pause. She trusted her daughter. I trusted my daughter. And that trust was betrayed in the most devastating way. My voice wavered, but I forced myself to continue. What Jennifer stole from us wasn't just money. She stole Margaret's sense of safety. She stole the time we had left before Alzheimer's takes her completely. She stole the peace we had earned in our final years. A deep breath, a steadying moment. And she nearly stole Margaret's life. The courtroom was silent. Even Jennifer had stopped crying. I finished with the only truth that mattered. I'm not asking for revenge. I'm asking for accountability. Because Margaret can't speak for herself anymore, so I have to speak for her. I stepped back. My legs felt like they were made of sand. Patricia handed the judge a letter. "Your Honor, this is from Margaret's neurologist." The judge read it quietly, her brow tightening. The letter explained that the trauma Margaret endured had accelerated her Alzheimer's progression significantly. In simple terms, Jennifer didn't just hurt her mother physically. She stole years of clarity Margaret could have had. Her lawyer pushed her forward. Jennifer stood, trembling, gripping the podium like it was the only thing keeping her upright. "Your Honor, I know I made mistakes. Terrible mistakes." Her voice cracked. "I didn't mean for Mom to suffer like that. I was overwhelmed. Kyle pressured me. I just wanted to fix things." The judge raised a hand gently. "Miss Holloway, this is not the time for excuses." Jennifer's face crumpled. She sobbed so hard she could barely speak. "I'm sorry, Dad. Please, I'm so sorry." I didn't respond. I couldn't, because the apology didn't belong to me. It belonged to the woman who woke up screaming at night because she thought she was still in that basement. To the woman who forgot who I was once last month. To the woman she tried to erase from her life. I looked down at my hands. The judge nodded at Jennifer to sit. The judge took her time before speaking. She removed her glasses, set them on the bench, and looked directly at Jennifer. "Miss Holloway," she began softly, "you did not act in desperation. You acted with calculation." Jennifer's shoulders shook. "You exploited your mother's vulnerability. You confined her in conditions unfit for any human being. You stole her money, her dignity, and precious time she will never recover." The judge's tone hardened. "This court sees no mitigating circumstances. You made conscious choices, repeatedly." The room went silent. Then the hammer dropped. "For your crimes, you are sentenced to 12 years in federal prison." Jennifer gasped. Her knees buckled. A guard caught her before she fell. 12 years, the maximum. "Remove the defendant," the judge ordered softly. Guards led her away as she cried out, "Dad, please! Dad, please!" Her voice echoed through the courtroom as the doors closed. And then it was quiet. A month later, the civil case reached its conclusion. The court ruled that Jennifer and Kyle were jointly liable for $375,000. $175,000 stolen, plus $200,000 for damages, trauma, and long-term impact. The judge also authorized wage garnishment on any future jobs, liens on any property they might own someday, seizure of any inheritance they might receive. It was justice, on paper, but practically, we would likely never see that money again. With the HELOC now rolled into our mortgage, our finances were strained. For the first time in 20 years, I had monthly payments again. Medical expenses, home care, legal bills, everything stacked like bricks on my chest. But what choice did I have? Margaret needed care, real care, safe care. Margaret's Alzheimer's continued progressing. Some nights she called for Jennifer, genuinely believing our daughter was a little girl again. Some nights she didn't know who I was. Some nights she asked if the basement door was locked. Some nights she flinched when the lights went out. And every time, I held her hand and reminded her, "You're safe. I'm here." Because she deserved that reassurance. Because she deserved love. Because she deserved a life untouched by the cruelty she endured. People asked me, quietly, nervously, if I regretted pressing charges. My answer never changed. No, because Jennifer didn't just commit a crime. She broke something sacred. She betrayed the woman who gave her life. She exploited the person who loved her most, and she nearly stole the last good years Margaret had left. Justice wasn't revenge. It was a boundary, a statement, a promise that Margaret's suffering mattered. And in the quiet of our home, in the soft moments when Margaret still recognized me, I knew the truth. We were still here, still together, still fighting, still surviving what Jennifer tried to take away. And that was the only justice that truly mattered. The months after Jennifer's sentencing moved quietly, almost strangely. There were no court dates, no lawyers calling, no reporters asking for statements, just silence and the slow work of rebuilding what was left of our life. But rebuilding wasn't simple, because what Jennifer broke wasn't something a hammer or nails could fix. It was trust, safety time, family, and those don't grow back easily. Margaret and I settled into a routine shaped not by what life used to be, but by what life had become. Every morning I prepared her breakfast while Elena helped her get ready. Some days Margaret remembered my name. Some days she simply smiled, uncertain but warm. There were mornings when she looked at me with full recognition, those rare, precious moments where her eyes lit up and she whispered, "Oh, there you are." Moments like that were gifts, small, fragile gifts I clung to. But there were harder days too. Days when she didn't remember our wedding. Days when she forgot we had a daughter. Days when she walked past me like a stranger. Worst of all, there were nights she woke up crying, whispering, "Don't lock the door. Please, I'll be good. Please don't." And every time I held her hand and said softly, "You're safe. You're safe. It's just us." People often ask whether I visit Jennifer in prison. The answer is no. Not out of anger, not out of hatred, but because I simply can't. I can't sit across from her. I can't look into her eyes without remembering the basement, the lock, the messages, the way she said, "Once Mom's gone." I can't reconcile the daughter I raised with the woman who almost killed her mother. I don't know if I ever will. But there's something even harder. Margaret doesn't remember Jennifer is in prison. Sometimes she asks where she is. Sometimes she forgets Jennifer exists at all. Maybe that's mercy. People assume I feel better because justice was served, because Jennifer is behind bars, because Kyle is paying for his part, because the truth came out. But justice doesn't erase guilt, because I left. I left Margaret with someone who hurt her, who used her, who abandoned her. Even though I didn't know, even though I couldn't have predicted any of it, I still carry the weight. Every time I look at Margaret's fragile hands, every time I see the marks left by Alzheimer's and trauma intertwined, I feel a quiet ache, a voice that whispers, "You weren't there." And that's a wound no courtroom can heal. Financially, life is harder now. The HELOC turned into a mortgage. Savings are gone. Caregiving costs rise every month, and I know, someday soon, Margaret might need full-time memory care, a facility, a place I can't afford, a place I never wanted her to be. But I'll keep her with me as long as I can, as long as she knows me, even for a moment, as long as she reaches for my hand in the morning, as long as her eyes find peace in mine. In movies, justice feels triumphant, a clean victory, a neat ending. But real life is different. Here, justice doesn't feel like celebration. It feels like truth, like clarity, like a message whispered through the pain. Some actions are unforgivable, and some consequences are necessary. Justice didn't heal us. It didn't bring back the stolen days. It didn't undo the suffering. But it did draw a line, a boundary, a declaration that what Jennifer did mattered, that Margaret mattered, That pain inflicted on the vulnerable won't be ignored. If someone asked me what the lesson is, what a viewer should take away from this story, I'd say this: never underestimate how quickly trust can be broken. Never assume the ones closest to you are incapable of hurting you. And never ignore the signs when something feels wrong, because evil doesn't always arrive as a stranger. Sometimes it walks into your home with your last name. Sometimes it sits at your dinner table. Sometimes it calls you Dad. But here's the part that matters more. Even after betrayal, after loss, after unimaginable pain, you can still choose love. Every day I choose Margaret. Every day I choose to protect what remains. Every day I choose to honor the life we built together, even if she can't remember all of it anymore. And that choice, that quiet, steady choice, is the only justice that truly matters.